The ground beneath California has not moved in 340 years. Not in the way it needs to. Not in the way it is going to. Right now, GPS sensors buried along one of the most dangerous fault systems on Earth are transmitting numbers that seismologists are reading twice, then a third time, then calling their colleagues at midnight. The data is not ambiguous. The San Andreas Fault is not just active, it is loaded, fully, completely, dangerously loaded in a way that has not been documented in the modern scientific record. And the section scientists are watching most closely has been completely silent since 1857. That silence is not reassurance. In earthquake science, silence is a countdown. The last time this fault moved, it tore open 225 miles of California landscape in 90 seconds. Trees snapped at the roots. Roads offset by 30 feet overnight. Rivers changed course. Entire forests lurched northward. And that was then, when California held fewer than 400,000 people. Today, 39 million people live, work, commute, and sleep directly above the same fault system that has been accumulating pressure every single day since that morning in January of 1857. The math of what has been building underneath them is not something most Californians have ever been asked to think about, but geophysicists have been thinking about nothing else, because the GPS data that is now coming in from monitoring stations along the fault is telling a story that the Earth has been writing for 3.5 centuries. And the final chapter is not written yet. Here's what makes the San Andreas different from every other fault system in the world. It is not one crack. It is a 800-mile-long network of interconnected segments running the entire length of California, from the Salton Sea in the south all the way to Cape Mendocino in the north, passing within 35 miles of Los Angeles, within 50 miles of San Francisco, within reach of every major population center the state has ever built. Two tectonic plates are grinding against each other along this system. The Pacific Plate moving northwest, the North American Plate holding its position. They are moving at an average rate of about 2 inches per year. That sounds slow. Over 340 years, it calculates to approximately 56 feet of accumulated displacement that has not been released. 56 feet of geological tension stored inside fractured rock that is already under pressure from every direction. That stored energy needs somewhere to go. It has always needed somewhere to go. Dr. Thomas Jordan at the Southern California Earthquake Center has spent years studying what he calls the seismic debt building along the southern San Andreas. The fault, he explains, is not a passive feature of the California landscape. It is an active system under constant tectonic stress, and the section running through the Coachella Valley and the Inland Empire has not produced a major earthquake since approximately 1680. That is not a rounding error. That is 340 years of strain accumulation on a fault segment that sits within direct shaking distance of 20 million people. The scientific term for what is happening is a seismic gap, a section of fault where stress is building faster than it is being released. In the language of geophysics, the southern San Andreas is the most significant seismic gap in the United States. Some researchers believe it is the most significant seismic gap in the world. The GPS data changes everything about how scientists understand the urgency. Beginning in the early 1990s, the United States Geological Survey and the Southern California Seismic Network began installing high-precision GPS monitoring stations at dozens of points along and adjacent to the fault system. These instruments do not measure earthquakes after they happen. They measure the slow, invisible deformation of the crust that happens before an earthquake occurs. They detect millimeter-scale movements in the ground surface. Movements so small that no human body could ever feel them. Movements that only become visible over years of accumulated data. And what that data has been showing, year after year, is deeply unsettling. The ground on the Pacific side of the fault is moving. The ground on the North American side is not moving in the same way. The gap between them is widening. The stress differential is growing. And the rate at which that stress is accumulating shows no sign of slowing. On a morning last year that received almost no mainstream news coverage, a team of geophysicists at the California Institute of Technology published updated strain accumulation models for the southern San Andreas using 30 years of GPS data combined with new satellite radar measurements from the European Space Agency. The models confirmed what field researchers had suspected for years but had been careful not to say loudly. The southern San Andreas segment is storing enough accumulated strain to generate an earthquake between magnitude 7.8 and magnitude 8.2. Those numbers do not sound dramatically different from each other. They are not close to each other. The difference between a 7.8 and an 8.2 is a factor of nearly 3 in terms of energy released. A magnitude 8.2 earthquake on the southern San Andreas would release more energy than all of the nuclear weapons currently in the United States arsenal detonated simultaneously, and it would release that energy directly beneath some of the most densely populated real estate on the planet. The shakeout scenario, developed by the USGS in collaboration with Caltech, the California Geological Survey, and dozens of partner agencies, modeled exactly what a magnitude 7.8 rupture on the southern San Andreas would produce. The results were published and immediately buried under the weight of their own implications. 1,800 fatalities in the most conservative estimates, over 50,000 injuries requiring hospital treatment in a region where hospitals sit on or near the same fault system that would just have shaken them. 3 to 5 million people displaced from their homes. 18 months before water service is restored to most of Los Angeles. The I-10 freeway, the economic spine of Southern California, destroyed at multiple points and impassable for weeks. 6 major gas transmission lines severed simultaneously, triggering fires that spread faster than emergency response can contain them. These projections were built on a 7.8. The GPS data is now suggesting the accumulated strain may produce something larger. Underneath Los Angeles, the complexity of the fault system adds a layer to the scenario that even experienced earthquake engineers find difficult to model. The Los Angeles basin sits on a bowl of sedimentary rock that behaves very differently from the solid granite of the surrounding mountains when seismic waves pass through it. Soft sediment amplifies ground shaking in the same way a bowl of water amplifies movement when you tap the table. Engineers call this the basin amplification effect. During a major San Andreas rupture, seismic waves will travel northward and westward into the Los Angeles basin, where the soft sediment will amplify them dramatically. Buildings that were designed to withstand the ground shaking of a 7.0 may experience effective shaking equivalent to a 7.5 or higher simply because of the geology underneath the city. This is not a worst-case assumption. This is the baseline calculation used by emergency planners who spend their careers thinking about nothing else. The fire risk is the element that keeps structural engineers awake at a frequency that the public never hears about. 1918. The San Francisco earthquake did not kill most of its victims directly. The fires that followed the seismic shaking destroyed 28,000 buildings and killed more people than the ground movement itself. Los Angeles in 2024 is not San Francisco in 1906, but it shares certain vulnerabilities that have never been fully addressed. Broken gas lines, disrupted water pressure that leaves hydrants dry precisely when they need to be full, roads too damaged to allow fire trucks to pass, a Santa Ana wind pattern that can drive fire across an uncontrolled urban landscape faster than anyone can respond. The shakeout scenario projects that simultaneous fires igniting across the Los Angeles region following a major San Andreas rupture would overwhelm fire department capacity within hours. The term planners use for this scenario is a conflagration event. It is a category of disaster that American cities have not experienced in more than a century. The southern San Andreas has the capacity to produce one. What the GPS data cannot tell scientists is the one thing everyone most desperately wants to know: when. Earthquake prediction is the great unsolved problem of geophysics. Scientists can measure stress accumulation. They can model rupture scenarios. They can calculate probabilities. They cannot predict the moment of failure. The Earth does not announce its intentions. A fault can remain locked a decade past every statistical model's projected rupture window, or it can move tomorrow morning before anyone has time to issue a warning. The Working Group on California Earthquake Probabilities, which brings together the most senior earthquake scientists in the country, published their most recent estimate. The probability of a magnitude 6.7 or greater earthquake on the southern San Andreas within the next 30 years is 60%. The probability of a major rupture sometime within the next 50 years exceeds 75%. These probabilities are not abstract academic calculations. They are the framework that emergency planners, building code architects, and infrastructure engineers are supposed to be making decisions against. In many cases, they are not moving fast enough. The infrastructure gap is the part of this story that is hardest to absorb. The California Department of Transportation has identified thousands of bridges in the state that were built before modern seismic standards and have not been fully retrofitted. Many of them cross the fault zone or sit directly in the amplification basin underneath Los Angeles. The retrofit program has been running for decades. It is not finished. The water infrastructure that supplies Los Angeles depends on aqueducts and transmission pipelines that cross the San Andreas Fault at multiple points. The Los Angeles Department of Water and Power estimates that a major rupture would sever these lifelines and leave most of the city without reliable water supply for months. There are contingency plans, there are stored reserves. None of the experts who have reviewed the plans will say publicly that they are adequate for a magnitude 8 event. The economic consequences extend far beyond California's borders. The Port of Los Angeles and the Port of Long Beach together handle 40% of all goods entering the United States from the Pacific. A major earthquake that damages port infrastructure, disrupts the rail and highway connections feeding it, and displaces the workforce that operates it would send shockwaves through every supply chain in the country within 72 hours. There is a section of the San Andreas north of Los Angeles known as the Palmdale section that has produced something called a creep anomaly in the GPS data. Sections of fault that creep slowly release stress gradually and are considered somewhat safer than fully locked sections. But the Palmdale data is showing something different from simple creep. It is showing what scientists describe as episodic slow slip, irregular periods of quiet interrupted by brief intervals of accelerated movement that do not produce surface earthquakes but do suggest that the fault at depth is not uniformly locked. Some researchers interpret episodic slow slip as a fault working its way toward a larger failure, releasing small amounts of stress in irregular intervals before ultimately producing the kind of sudden catastrophic rupture that releases everything at once. Others believe it is a safety valve. The debate has not been resolved. The GPS data keeps accumulating, and neither camp is ready to declare the other wrong. The building stock of Southern California represents decades of accumulated risk decisions made by homeowners, developers, lenders, and insurers who understood intellectually that the earthquake would come, but made financial calculations as if it would always come later. Approximately 1 million soft-story apartment buildings, structures built over open ground-floor parking garages, remain in the region despite being among the most dangerous building types in earthquake scenarios. Los Angeles passed a mandatory retrofit ordinance in 2015. The deadline for compliance has been extended multiple times. Tens of thousands of these buildings have still not been reinforced. The people sleeping in them tonight have no way of knowing whether their building is on the compliance list or not. The walls that hold their lives together were built on the assumption that later is always an option. Later has a deadline that no one can read. 39 million people live on top of a fault system that last produced its full potential 168 years ago, on land that GPS instruments confirm is storing more accumulated tectonic stress than at any point in the modern monitoring record. The scientists watching the data are not panicking. Scientists do not panic in public. What they do is look at the numbers, look at each other, and ask very careful questions about timelines that nobody has precise answers for. They write papers with titles that translate into plain language as, "The conditions for a catastrophic rupture are present and have been present for some time." They present those papers at conferences attended by other scientists who nod and write their own careful papers. The conversation is happening. It is not happening loudly enough or in the right rooms. The San Andreas has been here longer than California. It will be here long after every building currently standing above it has been replaced by something else. The 340 years of accumulated strain that GPS instruments are measuring right now is not an anomaly. It is not a malfunction in the data. It is not a reason for panic or for paralysis. It is a fact about the ground beneath one of the most important economies in the world. A fact that every person building something, buying something, or living somewhere in Southern California deserves to understand clearly. The fault does not care about deadlines or preparedness plans or probabilities published in scientific journals. It operates on geological time, patient in ways that make human planning feel very small. But geological time has a way of arriving on ordinary mornings when people are making coffee and driving children to school and doing nothing more than living their lives above ground that is finally, irrevocably ready to move. The GPS stations are still transmitting. The numbers are still climbing. And somewhere beneath the Coachella Valley, beneath the Inland Empire, beneath the basin that holds 20 million lives, the same fractured rock that has been locked and loaded since before California was a state is doing what it has always done, waiting. Not forever, just until it cannot wait any longer.